Hello, this is Jennifer Gustum. I am speaking to you today about leadership strategies and promotion of evidence-based policy development for the Nursing 809 DNP class for University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. My topic today involves leadership strategies for evidence-based change. How does one successfully advance evidence-based change within institutional and larger national health systems? So I'm going to go over the objectives with you. I'm going to apply a leadership theory to the concept of leadership strategy for evidence-based change. I'm going to go over key points and elaborate on those which I found based on the literature. I'll do a brief summary and share my references with you. Okay, so the theory I decided to use for this question is quantum leadership. It's a new theory about nursing leadership, and I just found that it was very interesting. It's a form of leadership that encompasses constant change and expands beyond the traditional, authentic, servant, and transformational leadership theories. This leadership actually focuses on interrelationships and how to empower others, how to empower yourself, and actually reaching beyond oneself using this form of leadership. It delineates that power is infinite rather than finite, and it is ever evolving and expanding. Dunham and Taylor delve into the 6 stages of power, recognizing that there are 6 stages of power within the quantum leadership theory. The first theory being powerlessness, which in this stage of power, people don't really believe that they possess much power, and so they find themselves manipulating others to obtain that power. Second stage is power by association. This means that people try to associate themselves with certain members of the organization that have the power, and usually hoping for a reward or recognition of some sort. The third stage, power by achievement, involves when people have goals, specific things in mind. They're striving for something like a degree, a certain position. They feel like they really have the power. They got that new car. Power is shown through outward symbols of success. So these 3 stages, first stages of power, are more external sources of power. The 4th stage of power, power by reflection, you cannot obtain true empowerment of the self without power by reflection. So this person may seem a little different. They have their own leadership style. It's basing their leadership on internal values. As the stage says itself, it's a state of much reflection. The 5th stage of power, power by purpose, is also an internal source of power. Its uniqueness lies in that it compares the idea of power to the idea of love, meaning the more you give of it, the more you give, the more you get back, instead of trying to be authoritative. The 6th stage of power, power by wisdom, involves people who usually are connected to a higher power. They seek balance, have balance in their life, usually have a spiritual connection extending within themselves and beyond themselves, and they can see the bigger picture. They see their fears and embrace them, instead of being run by fear, as in the first stage of powerlessness. So the use of quantum leadership is a profound form of leadership that focuses on love rather than authority, and recognizes that power is infinite, and that power grows by empowering others. So change is always constant, and therefore encouraging evidence-based change within an institution or a larger national level would involve empowering those around you, believing in what you're saying, using that positive energy, positive thinking to create positive outcomes. It's a ripple effect, and Dunham and Taylor describes it as a dance. So the dancers being the workers, performing, doing the work, and being in the thick of it, the choreographer being the leader, watching and having a vision for the potential for more, and the audience being the patient, so performing to what the patient wants, needs, so to speak. So I just thought that was really interesting. I find the concept very interesting. So going into the key points of what was found in the literature, first of all, it's important that the leader recognizes the need for evidence-based change, and also that change is imminent. That is another big piece of quantum leadership, is that change is constant. So the nurse leader would most benefit from performing a political analysis to gain support of change. The political analysis is described by Levitt Mason and Whelan. It involves understanding the background of the issue, so having your research done, knowing firsthand what is going on, why is this a concern. Find and evaluate the stakeholders or other possible leaders to empower, as quantum leadership would support. So find other people, find their strengths, help them understand their strengths and grow on them to be leaders themselves, to help find solutions for the issue through evidence-based practice. Analyze the problem through identification, so performing the research, collecting the data. Locate the structures in political settings, so understanding what levels of possible hierarchy or how the system works and unfolds through the institution or possibly the government, and what that means, what levels of government or institution are going to best implement the change and how the process works itself. Analyze the power bases. So quantum leadership, obviously believing in empowering everyone, have to understand, though, that not everyone believes in quantum leadership theory. So it depends on your own personal theory of power and how one believes power to be obtained, and also that other people are functioning in most likely external levels of power. For example, coercive power, reward power, expert power, referent power, and information power, connection power. These sound very similar, if you will, to what was described by Dunham and Taylor. These sources of power, as well as empowerment, are described by Levitt Mason and Whelan as well. So needing to know that to help bring forth the change is vital as well. And then just recognizing those resources. Again, understanding people's strengths and how they might best serve the solution. Thinking positive, using that positive thinking to help outflow of positive events. Being well prepared and versed in possible financial concerns or benefits. Right now, finance is a huge concern and always an issue at the forefront of any kind of change. People are going to want to know how it affects financially. So your best defense is having a good offense. So have those data collection ready, have your different sources of research available or performed yourself. So obviously another key point to consider here is the use of the research. We're talking about evidence-based change. We need to talk about research. That is research. Evidence-based practice revolves around research. So meta-analyses are very highly respected as far as research goes, because this means there are several studies to back up what you are saying, to explore different solutions, problems, etc., to see what other people have done, to see what is working best as far as healthcare outcomes, patient safety, quality, etc. And then this just helps with to explore the background and scope of the selected issue. Again, it's critical to have input from the staff nursing or the staff, medical, interdisciplinary co-workers that are working with this issue specifically, and how it affects them on a multitude of levels. Collection of data and quantitative methods both institutionally and nationally. There, know your resources. So the health services research, perform research specifically for healthcare that is to be advanced to policy. Empower the other nurses to perform evidence-based research and participate in data collection using that quantum theory, empowering the nurses, educating others on the resources available to them as well, bringing out more leaders. Bringing the issue to political attention might include media. Having an effective story is very advantageous. Needing to have sufficient evidence is crucial, as well as sufficient support. And understanding if the issue is controversial or a non-controversial issue and what that means as far as level of difficulty or different barriers that may need to be addressed in order to help bring a solution forth to help put the evidence-based research into practice. And also the use of educational funding and support for research if you're performing the research yourself or helping others to perform the research. So bringing the issue to the forefront, understanding resources to help inform and eventually create policy. There are multiple steps involved, obviously. Use of the large data and meta-analysis. It would be most helpful in gaining recognition and scholarly support that is evidence-based. So here I'm going to talk about another key point, the translation of the research. So actually getting that research into process. And in Policy and Politics, Nursing and Healthcare book by Mason, Levitt, and Chaffee, specific chapter Stone, Smaldon, and Enlow, and Lucero, page 323, there is a chart on the translation of research and different translation stages of levels of research. So process builds on clinical knowledge, research translating into clinical practice effectiveness. Starts with a biomedical science, which is translated to clinical efficacy knowledge through translation of clinical efficacy research. That's a level translation 1. Clinical efficacy knowledge is translated to clinical effectiveness knowledge through health services research, that source I mentioned before that performs research for healthcare policy, and comparative effectiveness research, same type of idea there, that's a level translational 2 research. Lastly, clinical effectiveness research is translated by effective health policies to spread effective interventions which form improved health care, quality, value, and population health. That's to reach that goal. And always remembering, things are always changing. That you have to bear that in mind. Nothing is ever going to remain constant. The only thing that stays the same in healthcare is that it changes. So the next 2 slides, key points, go into a couple articles that I had found regarding studies about leadership. This first one here, they use the terms leaders and followers, but actually, as I was reading the study, it was a qualitative study trying to understand how leadership is actually perceived among community nurses, and it embraced quantum leadership without ever mentioning it. So the idea, the old ways of thinking, so abandoning those old ways of thinking, leader versus the followers, the idea that the followers are robotic without input or any effective ideas, that leaders are born with certain qualities, that you have to be born with this. That authoritative and powerlessness versus acquired power versus empowerment. So those different sources, views of power. So the study identified again how leadership is actually perceived. And these nurses perceived leadership more as a process between leaders and followers. Again, they use the term followers, but that doesn't mean that they're always leaders and they're always followers. They go on to say that there are varying levels of leaders and followers, and that the roles are interchangeable as well. You can be a leader, you can be a follower, or vice versa. Leaders are constructed or created by the followers. The leader does not construct and force the views. The followers bring forth the views and concerns. The leader is then propelled by the followers, hence the other leaders, empowering each other. So important to inspire others to be a good leader, again encouraging everyone to be a leader. Gaining trust through diplomacy, empathy, and listening. These are all found to be good skills to be a leader, and important to engage people and have a vision. Again, that vision coming from the followers or the other leaders, however you want to look at it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, the other study I read also involved some quantitative and some qualitative data, but was done in the UK with advanced practice nurses and some of the barriers that they face in using leadership toward evidence-based change, toward policy change in public health, specifically for this article. So their concerns were having enough time for educational endeavors and research, different levels of expertise depending on the APRN, and a barrier would be lacking in characteristics such as self-efficacy, self-confidence, integrity, humility, and wisdom. Having that knowledge base and using it or not using it. The power belief system would affect how that change could be brought forth if the person felt that they were an authoritative power and simply enforce change because I said so type of thing. Negative or positive thinking. So understanding that has a ripple effect. If you think negative, you're going to create negative. If people around you are going to think negative, etc., etc. If you think positive, you're going to create positive. What you think is what you create. Having that empowerment of yourself and empowering others. Lacking in it would be a barrier, obviously. Important to have the interdisciplinary collaboration and interrelationships. Not using those, not recognizing those, being a separate silo would be a barrier. Having a mentor, very valuable in being a nurse manager, nurse leader. Not having a mentor would be considered a barrier. And then the value of the APRN roles, knowing that value of yourself and the community around you, knowing that value or not knowing that value would affect being able to create change. So just to summarize here, I have discussed with you quantum leadership and explored what that means. And it's really about the power of love and empowerment, of self-reflection, of wisdom, of extending beyond the self, really, which in turn allows the self to grow. So it's almost like an enlightenment type of leadership theory is how I was looking at it. And then just understanding how much the power of positive thinking and creating the change around you, letting go of that power, giving it to others, and it coming back to you in a better form. So I just found all of it really, really interesting. Dunham and Taylor even delved into how our emotions affect our DNA, and so and that in turn infects the environment. So it was very cool to read about. Also delved into how vital it is to perform a political analysis in creating a change on any kind of level, whether within an institution or truly a policy, national change. The use of research, you got to have research, evidence-based research, how that research is translated into care, how that process works, actually getting those better healthcare outcomes, the steps that need to be taken in a simplified version, of course. The old ideas of leaders versus followers, and then abandoning those old ways of thinking and actually seeing how other people are finding in studies support of this quantum leadership before even realizing it. So just that self-efficacy, that wisdom, that humility, that sharing the power with others, seeing the best in others and understanding their specific strengths, weaknesses, etc., and how to help them hone in on that and becoming leaders themselves. And then lastly, exploring possible barriers and non-barriers that affect evidence-based change as a leader and as a APRN advanced practice nurse leader specifically. And thank you for listening to my presentation. Here are my references listed there. I will give you a little time to look those over. As I said, a couple studies, Dunham and Taylor, and then using the Health Policy and Politics in Nursing and Healthcare book as well. So all in all, this is an interesting exploration for me as a future advanced practice nurse and what it means to be a leader and the importance of the self and understanding oneself and going beyond oneself. So thank you for listening.